Welcome to the Hive from Pollen VC, your destination for the latest thinking about mobile gaming, apps, and what you need to scale your business. And introducing Peggy Ann Sauls, founder of Mobile Groove, mobile analyst, tech consultant, and your host for today's show.
Data used to be the one source of truth for marketers, but this has changed. Has it ever? And the bigger question is, what do we know and how do we know it? And even beyond that, we want to understand automation that's going to give us the answers and the results. We're going to get a lot of this today because we have my guest, I'll just call you Z, the CEO of BLKBOX. Z, welcome to the Hive.
Thanks for having me, Peggy.
Well, I want to dive right in there because at Facebook, your work centered on helping some of the biggest advertisers grow their business in the mobile app industry. I mean, fast forward, you're taking that information, those insights into the black box that gives you the name of your company, literally lifting the lid at BLKBOX. You've built that platform using advanced algorithms and AI, and you say you can turn anyone, regardless of experience, into a best-in-class media buyer. Now, that's a big promise. What does it mean, and how does it work?
Yeah, so while I was at Facebook, I worked across some of the largest advertisers. And what I've seen is more than $1 billion run through the ecosystem. And throughout that journey, I worked with really experienced teams and teams that were relatively new. And I would define best-in-class media buyer as somebody who's able to hit target consistently. And they do this by creating intelligent campaigns. They have a strong understanding of the levers that are available to them. They create audiences that are highly intelligent and geo-based. They're looking at signals, monitoring. So all of these things are something that they acquire through time, experience, and collaboration. So when you have all of that recipe in place, what we've done is effectively taken all of that domain expertise and translated them into algorithms where somebody would take on average 6.5 hours on a per app basis on a per day time, and we've reduced that down to 6 minutes. So whether you're new or experienced, you're going to get the best of technology just by having 3 inputs into the system, which are budgets, creatives, and KPIs.
That is great the way you state that. First of all, a time savings and streamlining it, simplicity, you know. Now, staying with that for a moment, it's the data that's allowed publishers to set it and forget it now. It's going to be a much different collaboration with algorithms. You know, post IDFA, those algorithms are gone. They're not coming back. Automation is happening. What happens to ad monetization in this new normal? And where do you fit in? Where does automation fit in?
Yeah, I think regardless of the business model that you're operating under, whether it's ad monetization or in-app purchases, performance marketers and advertisers really need to rethink the way that they do performance marketing today. And what I mean by that is before you had access to first-party data through Facebook, Google, and other channels, but now that data is anonymized, aggregated, and dispersed across different systems. So not only that, previously, the whole narrative was trust the system because Facebook, Google can build intelligent automation for the end user. Now, approximately more than 80% of the spend used to go through low funnel optimization, such as VO and min ROAS. Now those optimizations are far less effective. So even now with the rollout of privacy-centric world, we're seeing costs skyrocket through the ceiling, essentially, specifically on VO min ROAS. So people really need to get a better understanding of how they work in AEO and MAI all over again. And to do that, we come into the picture and see us as like an intersection between advertisers wanting automation to help streamline processes and Facebook and Google no longer being able to deliver the algorithms that they had before. So that's the intersection BLKBOX is looking to fill.
How do you see creative? How do you see people approaching creative testing? Is it what it was before?
Yes, and let me just talk about what the world was like before and how it's going to be impacted now. So in the old world, you had unlimited campaigns, unlimited ad sets. You could be as lax or as restricted as you wanted in your ability to test creatives, and data was deterministic. So if you ran multiple ads, you could see which ad was driving performance. So in this new world, you're governed by 9 campaigns, which are limited to 5 ads set per campaign. And now data is anonymized and not deterministic. So why creative strategy becomes still important is is that still going to be a large lever for you to get things right? And more importantly, I would recommend advertisers, because they're given 9 slots, that they should allocate no more than 2 to creative testing. And
Hmm.
ideally, if they can get it done within 1 slot, within 5 ad sets, and having either one-to-one or one-to-many structure, that helps you kind of alleviate, or helps you use the remaining campaigns towards your scaled campaign so you can grow your business. Few things I would like to just touch upon here is
Hmm.
Facebook has rolled out statistical modeling techniques that they're still sharing performance on an ad level. So I would highly recommend advertisers leverage that while it's available. And I believe it's going to improve over time. And secondly, start using transfer learnings. So if you have creatives that are working on Android, you can take those learnings and bring them into iOS. And lastly, you already know who your users are, so use historical data to start figuring out what type of creative iterations you need to make, and so that you can acquire the right users for your game.
Very solid advice. Very valuable, I think, to our audience. I just want to zoom out for a moment because you seem to love tackling things that are a bit difficult. And that's really in your track record. You know, you have a history of tackling things. You've been tackling issues since arriving as an immigrant by descent in Canada, rising up the ranks at Facebook to basically manage the fifth largest account on Facebook, is what I understand. So, what is or what was the Eureka moment or the spark that got you started and got BlackBox started?
Yeah, and I'll just backtrack to when we first moved to Canada, which was
Mm-hmm.
in 98. And we were told that you had to educate yourself, you had to work hard and go after the opportunities that are now available to us. And that kind of rooted deeply inside me, where I like tackling bigger problems. I like learning things where it may be scary for others. So while I was at Facebook, I wanted to learn about the auction. I wanted to know what happens so that we can use tangible information and use that to grow advertisers. And now my co-founder Jay Shaw, he was one of the best solutions engineer at Facebook, and he's built every solution there is. So we tackled some of these bigger advertisers together. And just prior to the pandemic, we shared a lot of this information on how the systems work, and our key account grew to be the fifth largest in Q1 2020. So the aha moment for us was, hey, how do we take that knowledge and how do we disseminate that across the entire ecosystem? And that's essentially when we set on our path to build a platform that requires essentially 3 inputs, and we can share this knowledge across the rest of the gaming ecosystem so that they can experience the same growth.
3 inputs. It's so simple. What was it? Did you notice that like developers were demanding, get this down to the basics? This is very, very complicated. Not everyone has an army of data scientists to figure this out, right? What was it that told you how to build BlackBox?
I would reference that in our journey at Facebook itself, which is when we went into meetings every single week with the largest partners, around 90% of them wanted intelligent automation at this point. Less than
Mm-hmm.
20% had it right. Had basic automation. And what I mean by that is like basic bid and budget management. Again, it's a piecemeal solution, but it wasn't complete. Less than 1% of advertisers on Facebook had end-to-end automation, and they're the likes of advertisers that are spending millions of dollars every single day. So we worked cross-functionally with different teams, and also within gaming, which seems to be very, very sophisticated. And we learned how bidding works. We learned how budgeting works. We learned how lookalikes work and audiences, and you name it. So we understood the foundational systems, and we connected them together so that we can share this with advertisers. And that's what kind of led us to the growth that we saw in our accounts.
What are you currently seeing at BlackBox? Because again, automation is more than just bid optimization, and we're learning that the hard way right now. So what are you seeing? What are they coming to you for?
If I were to summarize it, I would say there's effectively 3 things that we're seeing across our partners.
Mm-hmm.
Either they are creative constraint, they're data science constraint, or they're ad tech constraint. And what I mean by that is creative constraint being either they lack the quality or the quantity of creatives that they need to continue to attract high value users. From a data science perspective, either they have their LTV curves that are not accurate, or their D1 and D7 targets are too aggressive to drive growth and scale. And lastly, ad tech, which is how do you build a system and a platform that can that can consume all of those signals in a single place and help alleviate the burden on the buyers so that now you can have a system that can drive systematic growth.
We're talking about games, right? And every genre has different challenges when it comes to media buying, how they approach UA. I mean, look at a hyper casual versus a social casino or a mid-core. So let's walk through a couple, okay, almost like a game show. I'm going to throw them out and you can dish up the best practice or what you know and see from your vantage point in each case, okay? So I'm going to start off with a really popular one and one that's, just hyper growth, social casino.
Social casino, right. So we work across some of the largest social casino partners right now on the most popular games. And what I would say is it's a niche market. Your audience is niche. The ecosystem is very, very competitive in this. You have a lot of players trying to acquire the same users. And the acquisition costs, they run relatively high. You need enough deep pockets to be able to absorb those costs and let the LTVs play out over time. In order to thrive in this space, I would say you need experienced media buying team that understands manual bidding very effectively so that they can control cost and acquire high value users that will scale well over time.
Okay. Hyper casual.
Hyper casual cost is a key metric that we need to maintain in this genre. And we do that by generating at a high amount pace so that if ads start to fatigue, we have other ads in place that can help acquire new users. So I would say the biggest lever that advertisers have in this space is obviously build fun, addicting games that are quick and easy, that don't require a lot of learning to go from install to playtime, but then get them in the game by having really high quality creatives.
You touched upon it at the top, right? Automation. It is the solution, but it's also a problem for UA managers. They maybe think they're being replaced or displaced. What value do they bring when algorithmic advertising is the way UA is done? I remember talking to someone, I love this quote, there is no UA without AI. Weigh in on that.
We are at this intersection essentially where gaming is relatively a young industry compared to others. And I think automation's here to stay at this point. And you can see that by all the acquisitions that are being taken place in a privacy-centric world. So the way that I see this analogy is through what everybody knows, which is Tesla, right? Tesla's vehicles, if you're in a congested highway, previously you had to constantly press on the stop and go, and that was very demanding on you. And now you have self-driving features, which operate amazingly during those scenarios, and it removes the heavy lifting away from you. But what the system still requires is you to keep your hands on the wheel, make sure everything is safe and sound. And that's what I see in automation, where if you're an experienced media buyer, you don't want to be spending 6.5 hours every day creating campaigns, creating audiences, looking at signals. You want to be focused on strategy and impact. And initiatives that's going to help drive growth for the company, not press buttons that are not going to have a strategic or a value add outcome. So I see an automation system, one that can coexist as a co-pilot to UA buyers and help them alleviate that burden, but still enable them to take full control when they want to.
Great analogy, by the way, a co-pilot. That makes it sound as if, yes, you are in control. You are in control. You are just working, co-creating, collaborating, what have you, with AI, but you're still there. You're still calling the shots. Luckily for all of us, Z, you don't just talk with me, which is fantastic. Could have you all day long here, but you also blog and you've captured a lot in your blogs recently. I'd love a recap because you say that there's a thread of what advertisers should consider immediately in order to compete in a privacy-centric world. Again, just a top line level. Everyone else will go read the blog in all its entirety and all its detail, but please give me a recap.
I'll just summarize into 3 points. For advertisers to be successful, the single most important thing is making sure that their events are set up right and the signal passback is correct. So Facebook requests that you have in descending order your highest value signals to lowest value signals. And what we've seen in the ecosystem is obviously purchase is typically number one. And you have proxy signals that relate to value as in the descending order. So advertisers that have it right, they have that channel and that funnel built out correctly. But the ones that are struggling where we see that is number 1 to number 5, they're sending the same amount of signals and they're of same value. So there's a lot of redundancy that's not really helping them acquire high value users. So that's number 1. Number 2 is campaign structure. So being confined and being governed in a world where you only have 9 campaigns and 5 ad sets per one campaign, you really need to think through your strategy. Whereas in the old world, you could put broad versus interest versus lookalike versus value based all in a single campaign. And because data was deterministic, you could still let your LTV curves play out and measure them over time. If you did that today and you had a hosh-posh of broad versus interest and lookalike, data is anonymized. So you're further putting more stress on your marketing science and data science teams to build the right models. So I would say start segmenting them based on value. And lastly, the highest point is targeting and optimization. Like I mentioned above, lower funnel optimization is starting to decay in its performance because the Facebook and Google algorithms are not as effective there. So start leveraging AEO, start leveraging MAI, and use your historical data to figure out what type of users you acquired and where. And those 3 things will help you stay ahead of the curve, essentially.
Let's really just go, rapid fire here. Consolidation in the ad tech space. We're already seeing it. Where do you think it will end?
I think we're going to see it for the foreseeable future. It's very young, it's very new, and I think it ends when we have key players providing end-to-end solution for any given developer to help grow their business.
I'll stick with the future. What is a prediction you have, or let's say that you secretly hope will not come true?
So I'll preface that by hope it doesn't come true. I think looking at data and the world that we're living in a pandemic world, I think the frequency of this type of world may increase into the future compared to the last 100 years. And the impact that this has had on businesses is vast. But the understanding of this is that when we looked at the last March 2020, a lot of businesses had a significant impact, but people still wanted a form of entertainment while they were home. So gaming actually thrived during that environment. And what happened there was you had a lot of advertisers pull out of the auction, which suppressed demand, and gaming came in to fill that void alongside tasks like gardening, online education, things that people can do at home. So I hope we see less of a pandemic style world, but if it does happen, I think businesses are adapting very quickly to thrive within it.
Finally, automation, goes, as we said, way beyond bid management. What's the next area top, publishers should be looking at, or what should they be advised to be looking at?
What we should really be thinking about is the holy grail solution, which is how do we build end-to-end automation that can be shared across the ecosystem where we have minimal inputs and the system drives a lot of the decisions so that we can demystify a lot of what it takes to be successful at performance marketing. And to me, that solution not needs to be just gaming only, it needs to be cross-channel and cross-vertical.
Mm-hmm. So finally, 2 little go-to items here, Z, because I think you're going to be a wealth of advice. Go-to for publishers, some tool they should have in their toolkit. And it doesn't have to be like you need to use this particular vendor. It can also just be, hey, you've got to use this tool to organize your life these days, right? So it can be the whole span. One go-to tool that you recommend.
That's a one go-to tool.
Yeah. Other than Black Box, we know that one already.
To me, honestly, I don't want to be promoting companies, but a great communication system has gone a long way for us, where email was very cumbersome, and using systems like Slack has been a lifesaver for us, where communication can happen much faster at a much rapid speed, and you're able to ideate, brainstorm, and solve things at a much faster rate versus sending emails.
Works for me. Totally on the same page with you. And finally, go-to source of news for all things gaming, ad monetization, blogs, podcasts, something that you are getting some inspiration from.
So I would say Deconstruction of Fun is a great podcast. It gives you great knowledge. You hear from different industry experts. Second, I would say GameSpot, where we can see the upcoming games that are being launched and read popular articles. But more importantly, I would say what's been a great source of inspiration is the network itself. where you can have one-on-one or one-to-many conversations. And especially in a privacy-centric world, I believe that like more of those conversations are going to help lead gaming into an innovative state all over again. And we will see new innovators being born through this. So I would say that my word of advice is more people just talking to each other, solving problems, sharing their experiences, so that we can all level ourselves up in the process.
Great advice, C. I couldn't chime in and support you more. This has been a very invigorating conversation. It's been one of the high points on the Hive. I want to thank you so much for taking the time today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Stay up to date with our show schedule by signing up for alerts at Pollen VC. That's where you'll also find our suite of financial modeling tools to help you plan and manage your business growth.